Pleasure to welcome Michael Kolaczewski to the podium. He's going to give us a talk on containerized pond gardens. A little history, he's been involved in the aquarium hobby for many, many years at this point. I mean, he and I talked quite a bit about some of the things that he's been involved in. He's maintained both freshwater and marine tanks, and he actually works and designs and maintains ponds, bred all kinds of fish, all different types of livestock, and has developed methods and ways of growing riparian as well as aquatic plants. I'm very much looking forward to this talk today. My container ponds were okay last year, so I'm hoping that coming up with all the information, I'll be able to kind of up my game this year. So without further ado, I present to you Michael. Okay, let's get this going. Okay, we're all set.
All right, thanks, Balin. Thank you, everyone. Can you see me? It doesn't realize how short I am. Anyway, I'd like to say I'm just under 6 foot, but way under. So my background is I guess you would say classically trained in natural sciences. I studied botany, horticulture, ichthyology, whatever ology there was. I did a lot of field work when I was in my university days at Northeastern Illinois University. We did prairie ecology and wetland studies. And there's so many different things to talk about. We're not going to dwell too much on that today, but wetlands are very, very threatened, not in this country, but elsewhere. And I just got a book from my friends at Missouri Botanic Gardens, the Ogooué Delta, which is the 3rd largest delta in Africa. And we have some cichlid friends here from GCCA. This book delves into the different cichlids that are found, these estuaries. Anybody here ever keep killifish? Oh, a few. Don't be shy. Raise your hand. It's okay. They live 6 weeks, and then they go away, and then the eggs. Oh, sorry. Then the eggs hatch and they live another 6 weeks and they go. Is that it? So I began my interest in ponds because I work with a lot. I do landscaping. I'm a horticulturist, and over the 45 years, I've been probably doing ponds and wetland work for maybe 30 of those 45 years. So big ponds, little ponds, all kinds of things. For homeowners, and I'll show you a few pictures here in a moment. Some of these systems are very, very large. The largest pond we ever did was 60,000 gallons. It was really just a wetland dump that we cleaned up and put in filtration and then end up putting fish and plants in. But these days, most of the ponds are 10 to 20,000 gallons, and they're involved. They're either flat and big pools or waterfalls. I'm going to show you a waterfall ecosystem next, and then we'll delve into smaller systems, pots, and things that hobbyists at home and homeowners can do. We're just waiting for the technical stuff. So I forget who asked me, but real quick about how to get to the Zooxay. It's just get out of the parking lot and turn left on Kimball, and it's like 3 minutes down the street. We'll do it real quick. So when you get there, Kimball and Dundee join. There's a bank on the corner. Just make a right turn just past the bank, pull into the Zooxay parking lot. It's a linear lot, so there may not be a lot of room, but Mr. Scott Rose, who owns that, we can park in the bank parking lot next door, and I think we should all fit in that. If there's any other room, we can use the Ace Harbor right across here on the east side of the parking lot. You'll see when you get over. How many been there before, by the way? So a bunch. So those who are in it and rent for free, I was in there the other day to check up on what we're doing. And somebody's in there and they asked, what happened to all the neon tenders that were in with the discus and the angelfish? And I said, well, in Brazil, the neons don't live with the angels and the discus fish because they get eaten by them. So I said, that's part of the system. And Scott kind of chuckled at me. I shouldn't have said that. But they are really good to eat if you're a discus or an angelfish. And he's got some ultims in there now. They're getting to be pretty good size. I mean, I know they were like the size of a quarter when I first got them. They've got some new discus there, but they're really looking good. And you'll see Lewis's tank as well. Okay, so let's get started. Let's move forward. Am I, we're not moving. These computers. These use slide carousel. Is that it now? Oh, there we go.
Okay.
All right. Whoop.
There might be a slight delay.
Go back. One more.
There we go.
That's good. Okay. All right. Left and right, right? Okay. So most ponds like this is the upper part of a pond. But what I've got in here, we've got water lilies, and you can see we've got water hyacinths and stuff. And I use lilies like this a lot of times, these shallow systems, to hold back the other plants. And what you have in the foreground is creeping thyme, and There's all kinds of plantings around this. This originally was an aquascapes pond. And a number of years ago, we reworked it. It was a little too shallow. And in 2013, 2014, we had a really bad winter, and a lot of ponds froze. This one, you'll see in a minute, on average is 6 feet deep. It's with the waterfall, and there's underneath this cistern up here, there's a huge pot, like a snorkel, that's another filter that we clean it once a year. And then the waterfalls go down. It's about 15,000 gallons. Just a close up there, and I didn't bring a pointer, but I think we can see. You can see there's a pot down at the bottom. I've got that planted with, we'll see the substrates in a minute. There's a composted loam, which is manufactured, not dirt. It's dirt, but it's made. And we put a gravel or an aggregate top on that to keep the fish and whatnot. But this pond is full of frogs, bullfrogs, pickerel frogs, and toads get in here. And so they tend to burrow into the muck, but they don't do a lot of damage. But you don't need a lot of water. This is only about maybe 14 inches deep. And so if you've got a small balcony or you're doing something in your backyard, you don't have to have a huge tub. I didn't bring those today. I've got some pots I brought, but we got some really big ones. It's a 2-person job to carry them around, and we put them in the ground and whatnot. So, hello, Varun. How are you, my friend? So, again, so this thing takes up like an acre. So, you need a lot of space. This originally was put in 2009, and then this was an aquascape. They used to have the aquascape master class. It's kind of like, I know those guys real well. It's kind of like the Tom Sawyer. You don't want to help me paint this fence, do you? And they had 80 people come and did the rock work. I had 3 people help me. We did the landscaping work. It took about a month to source all the plants, and then it took about 3 weeks to plant everything. This is about 6 years after it was originally planted. So there's a lot of unusual things. We won't dwell on that today, but a lot of unusual trees and perennials and stuff. Behind the scenes of the aquascape, actually. Better? All right, awesome. So this pond the pond itself is about 9,000 gallons. It averages about 6 feet deep. That's because we have herons in this region and egrets, and a full-grown heron stands about as tall as I am. They can stand and dip down to a pond about 3.5 feet. But they don't like to be in water where they bob around a bit. So we avoid that. I don't put any edges on these things. There's an island in there you can't see. We had a problem just a few years ago. All the lotus died because they were in the mud room, and I had left some at the bottom of the pond, but we had a really bad winter, and they are really susceptible to freezing, some of them. So we didn't have anything. But you see it back there in the left-hand corner. About 11 o'clock, we've got a lot of juncus. Those are aquatic grasses. And there's a big quince there to the left of that bench. There's a Sagittarian there. The problem with koi in a pond is that they like to dig up a lot of stuff. So you have to end up putting nets and things around the plants, and they'll grow out of it. Not everybody likes that, but that's one of those things. If you're going to keep these kind of fish, they're like big cichlids. They move stuff around. And what it is they're not necessarily eating the algae, is they're grabbing through all that greenery, and they're eating aquatic insects. I had a friend of mine come from University of Illinois a couple years ago, and they did a survey. I worked with dragonflies for a long time. So we had 8 different species of dragonfly larvae in this pond and 14 damselflies, which are the smaller little dragonflies. But one of the problems if you're trying to raise koi is you can't let those guys in, because dragonfly larvae start out about the size of a grain of rice, and they end up the size of a McDonald's French fry. And what do they eat? Well, they eat baby fish, and they eat them very well. I had a plan once. I had about 8 of these giant tubs of Shannon. I was catching all these koi fry and storing them out, and the dollar signs are rolling around when I'm sleeping at night. And then a few weeks later, I noticed that the tanks weren't as full because the dragonfly larvae were very healthy. So I thought maybe I should sell dragonflies, but I gave up on that idea. The planting around here, that's just the typical garden variety, no pun intended, sedum, very low maintenance stuff. Here's another view. You can see the waterfall there. Waterfalls can be huge and spectacular. This one, the water drops 14 feet from the top of the house down to the pond, and it aerates the water, and it mixes up a lot of this stuff. And each plateau is level backwards, so we can vacuum out the sediment and whatnot. So that's another little trick to keep the gunk out of the pond. And at the bottom of the waterfall, it drops down to 7.5 feet because everything tumbles down gravity. It settles out. So once a couple of times a month, we vacuum out the stuff. If Johnson's not here, but with an Owaze pond pump, little plug-in for him. Okay, So this is the Denver Botanic Gardens. It's a beautiful place. They have it's up, mile high in the mountains, but they do a lot of water features there. And this is something, looking at something different. You've got these different containers that have water plants in them, but they're on top of the water. So just another way to do representation. And for sake of time, I didn't show other slides. This waterway goes that way for about 800 feet. And they have every 8 or 9 feet, a different big container with mostly papyrus and then huge things like, and I'll show you a picture of Certosperma. It's a Southeast Asian aeroid. They get about 10 feet tall. If you go down to Miami and South Florida, people have them out in their front yards. It's kind of crazy, nuts to see that. Uh, this is the water feature comes out through the wall. The interesting thing is that right behind those trees, it's the parking lot. So you don't hear the parking lot noise because this water is cascading down and then it's flowing that way. They tint the water up there most of the time because of the high altitude and the UV. And I'll show you some pictures of Longwood Gardens a little bit where they heavily dye the water to keep the algae down and cyanobacteria. But this is something you can do at home. You can have something like this out on your patio. These are waterproof pots, and you put a pot inside of that. If it's too big, I use bags of gravel, and I didn't bring a picture, but I use florist foam, the green foam, and we build up a shelf, just tape it together, cable tie it together, and you put your pot on top of that, and it presents itself very well. This is the Fairchild Tropical Botanic Gardens in Miami. It's an incredible place. They have so many things there, a world-class collection of palm trees. Fairchild was a very famous ethnobotanist, and he studied tropical fruit. And they have, I think, 350 cultivars of mango growing down there. And if you like mangoes, and I like mangoes, it's kind of crazy. So there's a mango festival, and I hate to say after the third or fourth mango. What do you think of that? Well, that one's good too. I don't know what to say. It's kind of like mango is mango. Every one of the plants in here is in a container. These striped lily pads are tropical lilies. So they're grown not only for their flowers, which you can see they're very striking, but the foliage is very dynamic. It's a very, very interesting plant. Those are different Sagittaria. As you can see, they're blooming. And in the back there, that's an Alcantara bromelia. That's outside, but on a pedestal. Those typically go up in trees, and they get that large or bigger. I've kept them in the past, and they get 5-6 feet diameter. The trick is to buy them when they're smaller because a lot of ones you get here, they get shipped for the garden centers or the boutique garden shops. They're going to bloom shortly. And the bloom is, they get 8-9 feet tall, but then they die after that. So you can get them to live for 5 or 6, 7 years around here. I used to have a greenhouse years ago, and we'd keep them 10 years, and they would finally bloom. So this is an application that if you have space, once again, you can look at things like this. But let's talk now about some of these containers. Now, I talked to my friend who distributes this Laguna stuff, and they just discontinued these giant tubs. I'm not sure why, because I have a supply in my garage. I typically use them for hospital tanking koi. I used to have bigger cichlids, manganese cichlids, big Oscars, and if somebody would get beat up, or if I'd put them in there to breed, and then, it wouldn't be the other tank. So this is like 270 gallons. It's about, I would say, 3 feet high and not quite 6 feet long. I think they used to sell for $350 maybe. You might be able to pick them up a little bit cheaper. But the nice thing about this is very heavy. It's virgin resin, so it's not recycled. I never drill holes in anything. I have a few tanks with holes. But this one would be great. You can put it in the ground. I would caution you, you see those ridges all the way around the top. Once you bury that and don't cover those up, it really sucks into the ground really hard. You're going to have to dig a bigger hole to get it out at some point. But it's a great way to get into a pond without taking up a lot of room. This is one I would put a little filter pump in, or submersible pump. You can put an air stone. I usually don't worry too much about water circulation. In the summertime when some mosquitoes come, I just check the tubs now and then. I have some bigger ones. I just throw a bunch of platies in there, and they're fine without any water movement per se. And they'll eat all the mosquito larvae, so you don't have to worry. But they will bring raccoons who like to eat the platies. So. We had a terrible, terrible storm out here last night. There's a few churches right down a few blocks away. They've closed the streets because they tore the roof off. And we had an owl nest in our tree came down. And then my neighbors had a dead cottonwood. And there were a bunch of poor little baby raccoons walking around this morning. But, it was we had 72-mile-an-hour winds out here. It was pretty dynamic last night. Our phones, my wife's and my daughter's kept alarming. I said, well, let's turn these off. We're all in the basement. We don't need to hear the alarm anymore. This is made in England. This is Granville. It's a very good company. This is all recycled plastic. This is a lower, and I'll show you a picture of one of these set up later. This would be great for carnivorous plants, bog plants. We have a lot of members that grow, grow out plants, stem plants. This would be good if you have the room in the summertime. I have a lot of tropical plants. Everything goes out of the house pretty soon, and everyone's happy that they're out of the house and out of the basement, I can tell you. But this is a nice one. It's 39 wide, I think about 2.5 feet long, and 2.5 feet wide, and about 12 inches deep. So it's pretty manageable. So you could do a lot with this. We're going to talk about the substrates here shortly. When I grow carnivorous plants, I use sphagnum moss and I use fine microscopic sand and really tiny, tiny perlite. And I mix that together. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to talk about that where you can do that, but you can look on YouTube and the internet. There are all kinds of formulas. There are numerous carnivorous plant people now. It's really one of the ones people I work with is Red Leaf Exotics. He's down in Tennessee, and he has an amazing collection. And he hybridizes these big Nepenthes, these Bornean pitcher plants. These things look like beer steins. They get so big. But the Sarracenia, which are hardy carnivorous plants, I'll show you a picture of that in a second. Those would do very well in this. Okay, we all know about the different soils, API in the back there, Aquarium Pharmaceuticals, Aquasolum, that's a Seachem product. The Pond Guy, there's a number of different pond companies. These are all boutique manufactured. They do a two-part system. I'll show you that shortly. It's a composted loam and then an aggregate, which is like an arcalite or zeolite, these mineral products. Akadama, which has been around for a very long time, is a fired clay out of Japan. It's interesting that Amano-san, Takashi Amano-san, he used to use these as his substrates in his early tanks, which I think is very interesting. Then, of course, he went into the high-tech stuff. And just really quick, I follow Green Aqua on the internet, and they just released the master class that one of the ADA guys did on Iwagumi and the whole history of that. And they showed one of Amano's early tanks 45 years ago. He set up an Iwagumi with an Akadama substrate. So if you want to check that out, it's a very interesting 25-minute video. That big bag in the back, I'll show you that shortly. That's royal gold. This is actually a cannabis, proprietary cannabis substrate. So, but I'm starting to grow some aquatic marginal plants in that because I'll tell you about it shortly, but it's a very high quality product. Of course, the biotechnical and besides the recreational use of cannabis, but these growers are very intense people. They have very specific, most of these companies are run by big biotech firms. They have a biochemist on staff. Someone like me would go around and cut leaves, but they have people that actually are critiquing the mix. They every day they're adjusting. Like if you're automatically dosing your tanks, they're adjusting the liquid feeds of these plants. They're very expensive plants, but it's a very high-end product. Okay, Akadama is on the left, and you can see this is a very fine one. It comes in many different sizes, and it will last at least 2 years, I think, maybe 3. On the right is zeolite, which is an aluminum silicate. There's a lot of these that are used in different media, but this one, oh, thanks. This one is good because it will slowly leach out or release micronutrients. We'll talk about basalt shortly. A lot of these things, there's basalt, there's zeolite, there's azomite, which is used in agriculture. The potato farmers out in the western states use a lot of azomite. It's a volcanic dust. I use it in potting mixes. So these things can be utilized in your containers. Now, they do have weight. We won't necessarily talk about dirt today. That's a whole other topic. But these also have the same density as regular soil and dirt. But you don't have to worry about washing them or making sure there's no contaminants in them. These are all coming pre-bagged from big operations, and they're ready to use. You will get a little cloudiness in the water, but once this settles out, it's not necessarily a problem. Okay, so this is zeolite and acrylite, which, we're getting, don't get too much nerdville here, but a lot of these things are combined because of either the densities, their ion exchange capabilities, or the cationic charges. We can get into that with soils too and whatnot, filtration. But what this is a balance between, it keeps a low pH, it does feed the plant. You can also add, we'll talk about fertilizing in a minute, but this one is an all mineralized system. It's very old, it's an older kind of an aquarium, a pond substrate, but it's still around and a lot of people use it because it's really easy and relatively pricing wise, it's actually pretty good. You just load up the pot, put in your plant, put it in the pond, put it in your container, and and off you go. And then since it has weight, it will hold the plant down. I've done mud pots before. Sometimes the plants will pop out, especially lotus before they really begin to root. So we would tie plant weights on them. Later on, people got smart, started using cable ties and slate. But this kind of stuff, you just put that thing in the container. You don't have to necessarily worry about too much how it's going to pop out or not. All right, so we all know about the aqua soils. There are many brand names. ADA makes Amazonica 2. We have UNS. We have Seachem. They're all manufactured in a similar way, and these tend to last. I would say, what do you think? A couple of years probably before they begin to, we'll say, degrade, because even like with potting mixes and terrestrial plants, the nutrients and the material. I use bark. It's another story for another time, but I use a lot of composted or aged pine bark. 3 years and it's beginning to wear out. So these things are really good. Some people say don't combine them. I've been growing irises and cattails with this and akadama, and they actually do pretty well. So this is a coarser akadama. And as a quick aside, a lot of the aroid people in South Florida grow Anubias outdoors and other things. They grow it in this stuff, and they liquid feed with a cold pressed sea kelp, which is a escalanium or escaphylium. I use that, and that's a very low nitrogen. So it's not necessarily a lot of food. I'm a lean fertility person with my tanks, and just every week or so, or every other week, just give them a little dose of the fertilizer. This is really good because it's going to anchor the soil, and we know with the aquatic air, they don't want to be buried in the substrate; they want to sit on the substrate, and they get their nutrients. And Anubias, I got some. I'll show you here from a friend of mine. They're very hardy. They're like a house in the garden. All right, this is Gunnera manicata. This is a Chilean plant. They can get 8 to 9 feet tall, and the leaves can get to be about the size of a car wood. But that doesn't happen here unless it's in a greenhouse. But I'm going to show how these come in. I got these out of Pacific Northwest last year. Singing Tree Gardens, I think. They're online. And they sell these as 1-gallon pots, but they don't send the pot. But look at that root system. That was grown in a greenhouse, of course, and then it shows up here. And so I just did this the other day, so I figured I'd throw this in here. So I wrap them up. They're in the basement, basically in a container and a tub on the floor. And so they're dormant, but they're just starting to emerge. And that's akadama and the aqua soil. So they will sit, the way I grow these, they are not quite riparian, so they sit on the edge of streams and rivers. A friend of mine, Mark Bridgen at Cornell, he studies these. And they've seen them up in the alpine snowfields growing on these glacial streams, but they're just at the water's edge. So they can take cold weather. They can't take below 0. I think 25 degrees and they're checking out the door, So that's how they do. But this is an interesting plant if you ever want to try these, because they get large right away. You have like leaves like an 18-inch pizza the first season. So if you're looking for something unusual to have or try something different, this is something to take a look at. This is composted loam, and so these companies that make soil, if you go to Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, whatever big box store you go to, there's a few companies that make this, and they put one day it's one bag, Tuesday it's another bag. But this comes from garden waste, construction lumber. You'll even find drywall. They recycle drywall for this. There's a company in Ohio, Sievers. They recycle dynamite, not sticks of dynamite like Wile E. Coyote dynamite, but the components, because if once broken down or before they make it, some of it's contaminated. They use that. It works pretty well. So you see there's rock in there, there's twigs, there's branches, there's a piece of clay on the right corner there. So this is actually a very clean product. There isn't any bacteria or biological activity yet, but when you put your plant in, and if most of the plants will have something on their roots, bacteria, copepods, whatever, this is a good medium to use. And they use this in combination. I'll show you in a second. So I use pots that have holes in them or are screened. Why is that? I want to have passive water movement in the substrate. There's a thing to think about, and that's anaerobic bacteria. And we can get in our fish tanks from time to time. Certainly in a pond, I haven't done a mud bottom pond in probably 25 years. We now use liners. We use Goodyear EDPM. It's a higher end product, and we use different fabrics around that. But we will get sediment buildup after a time. All the ponds we do have gravel bottoms, and we have a big pipe in the old under gravel filtration system because we blow the gravel out once a month and backwash it to get all the sediment out. Koi can be very messy fish. So I do this so that water will move in and out of the pot in a sense, and that way we get some oxygen and exchange and ion exchange as well. So, let me go back here. So, we put everything into the pot, the substrate, and then we add the fertilizer tablets. Um, I use the Seachem makes them, Laguna, there's, I don't know how many companies, they make these hard pressed tablets. I know some people in aquariums use Osmocote and some other things. I don't use those horticultural based fertilizers in my aquatic stuff because I just don't. But the other thing is that these are more or less hard compressed. They will take maybe a full season to break down. The plants eventually find them, and as the roots begin to work on them, they start to break apart. The problem with these coated or slow release things, in my opinion, is that the way they make those, they make these little tiny balls, and then they coat it with linseed oil. It's a fairly elaborate process. It's like a big tower, and they blow the fertilizer in there, and then they spray in the linseed oil. And the longer it's in there blowing around, the harder the shell. So typically you get a 60-day or a 90-day. Some of the tropical growers, like, they get a 365-degree day release. That's all right. And I have not seen myself any empirical data about any research on that. But once you're in a 100% aqueous solution, that's going to somehow break down. If they have the capsules, the gel breaks apart, and you have to bury it very deep in the substrate. You know, the dirted bottom systems, the Wallstead system, and of late Father Fish. There's a bunch of people now that do that. There's nothing wrong with that system. It works until it doesn't. But you're loading up the tank with lots and lots of nitrogen-based stuff, and then the plants are absorbing it. But at some point, there's got to be a turnover with that. So I like to avoid that. And so I use this system. This is a 12-inch pot, and there's 3 of those tablets in there. It's going to be for a medium-sized plant. So this is about 8 months ago. I got some very weird anubias from a friend of mine who'd been in Thailand. And I can't show you the pictures just because of copyright stuff, but he went to a nursery where the guy had 50,000 anubias growing underneath shade. And of course, there were these giant bees that looked like helicopters that were landing on the flowers, and beetles. And so this is some kind of a hybrid. It looks like a hostifolia, but it's not. I saw the flower, and the flower is very weird. So there's just something in there. But he's trying to get them to grow, and he gave me some. And I'm using this. Let's pretend this is a lotus for today. So those leaves are probably 8 inches long, and they look a little beat up, but they're actually doing well. They were compressed in the bag. I use sphagnum moss to transition plants. What I do is I soak the moss, and then I put some fertilizer in, a very weak fertilizer, and I wrap it up, like a wrap sandwich, and I put the roots in there and the stem. These didn't have a lot of roots to begin with, and I just leave it alone in the bag. I open up once in a while, to get some fresh air, and this is about 3.5 months of growth. So that's very good. So, I'm making a mini greenhouse is what I'm doing. So I use something called Nitroform. It's a golf course product. It's 3900, and I put that in there, and then I put a little bit of cold press Seek out, and I leave it alone. Just enough. I mean, really like a few drops of this fertilizer. These plants live in muck, and on the shoreline, or they're growing in these sort of semi-submerged swamps. And their leaves are out of the water because, of course, they need to, to get fresh air. But they're very sturdy leaves. If anybody's kept philodendrons and whatnot, that's a very hard leaf plant. So we lay that down in the pot, and the roots will find their way down. As you can see, there's a lot of white and green roots. It's a very healthy looking plant. The back end of that growth was a little soft, but there wasn't very much rot in it whatsoever. So I always clean everything up, and I use something called Xeritol, which is a horticulture product. There's a number of those. The company makes 3 or 4 of those products. And I just make a solution, dip them, rinse them. This wouldn't go in a fish tank right away. And that cleans up any fungal issues or any bacterial issues. And it's a really good product. They use it in plant production. They use it in cleaning the greenhouses. They sometimes do not use chlorine bleach for some reasons because of work-related stuff with chlorine in the air and whatnot. But the Xeritol has a very low entry level. All right, so then we put our gravel on top, and that, of course, that's when I water it, that's going to settle, and you'll see the pseudo stem there, so don't worry about that. But that's how you would do these kind of a pot like that. It's pretty simple to do, very straightforward. That'll last an entire season. If you have lotus or lilies, the thing with lilies is they grow from the back to the front, and that's that very front couple of inches where there's a new tip for next year. So you can always divide them and push them back with just that front tip. So I've sort of positioned that here like this. Okay, so I also use these, if you go to Caputo's or Butera or, Valley of Produce and say, do you guys have any onion crates I could get or melon crates? And they usually give them to you, or, I'm very friendly with the guy at Caputo's out here, and so I give him fertilizer and he gives me onion crates. It's a great, we go out in the back and make the exchange. But I use these for not all above board. This is a great way to put in bigger plants. Like everybody, and I don't have a picture, so I apologize, but the thalia, which is the tropical cannas, they get these giant, sword-shaped leaves, or cattails, or papyrus. And I line this with the fabric, and then I usually put gravel or bags of gravel, filter bags of gravel on the bottom to hold that down, and then fill in the substrate in there and then put the plants in there. And this works well with the koi. They can't get into the container and chew on the plants or dig it up. And then in the fall, you just lift it with the handles and take it right out. So if you want to try some bigger plants, or you say, well, I've got a little water pond now, or I want to do something outside, that's a way to do it. Now in the wintertime, I bring these in, and I have one of those tubs in the basement or in the garage. I have a horse trough heater in there. It's not a big one. That just keeps it from freezing. And they stay dormant in there. You don't have to worry about that. I've got some tropical water lilies. They come inside, and I put them in a tub in the basement, which always has to be out of the way so people can get to the freezer. That's the thing. So these are, you can buy these. They're called bio boxes. They're actually a little bit more involved than this. They have inner sections like an office file system, a little bit heavier. They use them for filtration system stuff. But if you can find these and you want to mess around with this, it's a great way to start, get into it. You don't have to put a lot of investment into it. Now we saw that tub earlier. This is at Longwood Gardens. So this is a metal pan, but they now are using those plastic ones. So these are all different hardy pitcher plants and sundews. And so you don't need a lot of room to try this kind of gardening out. They don't need a lot of fertility. In fact, I usually don't add much fertilizer at all. They do very well in the system. I'm not doing RO right now, but you can use tap water if you just, pH neutralize it, or use like C-Chem, which takes out some of the other elements and, gives you a neutral pH and gets rid of the chlorine. You can use DI water. But remember, once they're outside, and I grow these outside, you're going to get rain on them and whatnot, but the rainwater isn't going to affect them that much. These do very well around here. I put these in the garage for the winter. I just put them in a big, like a crate, and cover them up with some sphagnum moss or evergreen branches, and they'll fit in there pretty well. They can freeze and won't get killed by that. I wouldn't leave them outside because we didn't have a bad winter this year, but we had some really cold weather. We had like 10, 11 below out here for about 12 days, so it's very, very cold. Pricing on these things, you can pay $10 a plant, you can pay $50 a plant. There's a lot of hybrids that are more expensive. And you can find these, in 3 to 6 inch pots online. And they'll maybe be about 7, 8 inches tall when you get them. And it's a very nice way to try this. Now, once they're flowering, they have a very weird flower. And then the pitchers come up with the leaves. You can give them a little bit of food. Like I said, I don't give them too much food. And the sphagnum moss does very well. I hydrate it and I chop it up, and then we mix it with the sand and the perlite, and they grow in it very well. Some people use a soil or more of an aquarium gravel mix, but where they grow in these boggy situations, it's almost like a sponge, or like say a brownie kind of a consistency. It's not really a dirt. These are very boggy areas where the plant material is broken down. It's very spongy, and they move in. It's wet, and then it's not totally submerged, but it's kind of a soggy situation. So there's all kinds of sphagnum moss out there. I use and support Inca moss. It's a cooperative in Peru. A number of indigenous communities. They only harvest this moss once a year for several months. It's a bit expensive. This is a 12-pound bag or 6-kilo brick. It's landed at my front door is about $89. But when you break this apart, I can fill a wheelbarrow with. And this is a very long fiber sphagnum. At that Anubias I showed you, the sphagnum moss was reviving in there. So it's not completely dead. It goes dormant. But this is harvested by hand. They pack it by hand. When I first heard about this, a friend of Miami was telling me about this. I met some of the people that were with this years ago at the Air Rights Society meeting. And they said, well, what do you do up there? They said, well, we grow potatoes and we don't do anything else. And then we make potato beer. And I thought, well, I'd like to try some of that someday. And it's very potent. I've tried it. But this is a really good product, but you can buy all kinds of sphagnum moss. It's very dynamic, and again, for certain things, I also grow begonia cuttings in sphagnum moss. So it's a more of a horticulture thing, but it's a very good product to try out. All right, tree fern fiber from New Zealand. Um, Over in the EU, people that grow cryptocarine, or lagonandras grow them in this tree fern fiber, and they grow them in pots. So they're more grown as a terrarium plant because what they do over there is they grow them for the flowers, and they also hybridize their cryptocarines. There's all kinds of cryptocarines available in the EU you don't see here, but they're grown that way. This could be used for marginal plants. It's a great orchid medium, and what you're seeing there, it's a little damp because I've had it on the shelf, but it's very fibrous. Water passes through it, but also has the capacity to hold water. You know, there's a whole science in horticulture of water holding capacity, space, porosity. We don't worry about it in an aquarium because there's always water. So, but in a terrestrial-based system, we want water to pass through. We want the roots to get slightly dry. We want to wet them again. But this is a great product, I think. Like I said, I've got a number of anubias growing in this right now, and I'm hoping to get my plant carts back up, and I want to start doing more crypts and like I more emerge growth. They look very good in the aquarium, and they surprisingly they look even better when you see them growing in their native habitats. I've seen pictures of lagonander that look like bouquets. They're so big. Like coconut coir. On the left are the chunks. On the right is coir peat. Peter Boyce, he's one of the leading authorities of Bucephalandra. In fact, he's rewriting the monograph now. He's in Borneo. He's a British expat there. But he has a research nursery, and everything he grows, whatever it is, he's growing a coconut coir. And I've seen Bucephalandra that are 12 inches across in coconut coir. Of course, he's in the rainforest, you know. He lives 5 miles from the second largest orangutan sanctuary in Borneo. Bless you. And it's just on some days you know the orangutans are nearby, and other days you don't. It just depends where the wind is blowing. But yeah, and they come into the nursery. They don't eat the plants, but they take away the 5-gallon buckets, and then he has a jackfruit tree, and then of course they eat the durian, which you know what durian is. It's a wonderful fruit if you get the right durian. If you don't get the right durian, it's a bad experience. But what's good about these? This again is aseptic. It's almost pH neutral to slightly acidic. The coir peat is a very good product. I'm trying some things out. You can see the hairs in there, the fibers, and the way they break the husk up, where they cut it or shred it, is how they get these different components of the sizes. And it's a huge industry. There is some negativity, of course, about palm oil production and whatnot, but like I always say, we grow corn around here, and so is ethanol in your gas tank. And being a slave to Dodge trucks, I've had 4 Dodge trucks, and I've replaced 3 fuel tanks on the Dodge trucks because the ethanol wears out all the plastic hosing that goes into the thing. So, but I'm not saying anything bad about Dodge right now. All right, let's talk about this product. This is Royal Gold Tooper. This is a core media. It's not peat moss. And so they take this coir because it has a wonderful pH capacity, and there's a lot of ion and cation exchanges in this thing. And H forest products means bark. Southern yellow pine there are 3 or 4 species of pine trees that they call southern yellow pine. And then there's Pinus radiata, which grows out in the Pacific Northwest. And they combine these with Douglas fir in very small pieces. And this perlite, probably you could put 2 or 3 of those pieces of perlite on a dime. They're really small. And they use bath salt. Bath salt, Hawkeye stone is bath salt. So those of us who watch these different videos, that's what you get. And the reason they use these minerals is that the bath salt releases micronutrients. It helps stabilize the media as far as holding it together. And with cannabis plants that are used for biotechnology and biomedical use, they grow them in giant shopping bags. And they put this little plant in there, and it stays there for the year or 2 or 3 it's going to grow. And this product is very stable. This is expensive. I mean, that bag is $45. But the results, people are going to spend the money on this stuff that want to get it. They'll get it. But I think this has potential to be used in riparian media, vivarium media. I mean, I'm not doing any dirted tanks anytime soon, but I think you could probably, I'll use the term monkey around with that because I think it's very clean. And they do research on this stuff. They find lots of microorganisms in this thing once the plants start to inhabit. So it's a very beneficial habitat, not to make redundancy, but for beneficial bacteria. So it's something to consider. And then I'll talk about the raffle thing in a minute, but I brought a couple of bags of this for the raffle prizes. All right, so iris, acorus, calla lilies, colocasia, crinum, which is like an amaryllis, cypress, or the different grasses. We all know Echinodorus, equisetum, horsetail. There's water hibiscus, Houtinia. We know about that. We see it at the aquariums. That's actually a pest down south, so they're thinking about not allowing it to grow anywhere. But it's great in an aquarium or great in a pond situation. Hydrocotyle, we know that. That's a marginal plant. It'll grow out of the water. Lobelia, cardinal plant. Neptunia, which is a tropical water-sensitive plant. I'll show you a picture of that in a second. And there's many other plants. They all do well in these wet situations. You can have different containers or groupings of these plants in a bigger pot. This is something for you to think about. And again, some of them don't want to be totally submerged, but they like to have wet feet. And so a lot of these different things in these containers will do very well. Here's Neptunia. This is a tropical floater. This is at the Longwood Botanic Gardens in Pennsylvania. They put that out in April, and this is October. So it does very, very, very well. And they don't do a lot of fertility with their system. I'll show you a picture here in a minute, but everything gets the tablets and then the water temperature. So this is tropical water, as you can see the sign. So they have these giant ponds that are heated at 78 degrees all year. So this is a big budget organization. I think their budget along with is like $50 million a year. It's also supported by the DuPont, one of the DuPont family members. So there's, they've got money coming in. But so that's one of the things in public horticulture. If you're going to display these things, you've got to, they've got to put out and get some stuff done. Now, canna glauca is what you typically find when you have water cannas, and Longwood Gardens they're very well known for their hybridization of water cannas. They also, Marvin's here, I saw you come in, but Marvin, these guys are doing tissue culture cannas. So they're virus free, of course, which is very important. And they also tissue culture their own water lilies. They have these Amazon water lilies, these giant water lilies. They hybridize their own hybrids. And we won't see any pictures today, but they do these giant mum displays. They make mums that look like umbrellas. And they have their own TC lab. They produce those. They also do a lot of rare plants in their tissue culture. So there are many different cultivars and colors. Again, and see how dark the water is. They have to manage the ultraviolet and then algae and cyanobacteria. So they dye the water all season. Because otherwise they'd have to run ultraviolet on their filters, or they also have to then figure out how to get rid of, because these things are just algae magnets. It's unbelievable. So this is another formal planting, but every one of those plants, here's a papyrus here in the front. All those plants are in containers and they're tiered up on the shelving. I'll show you a picture in a second. So they can raise or lower them. So at home, you can use a milk carton. You can take a couple of nursery pots and build your shelves up. You can use rocks, like we talked about the florist foam. You can do that. And that way you can adjust the level of the plants in or out of the water. So the gentleman on the right is on top of the shelving, obviously, and the gentleman on the left is on the bottom of the pond. So there's quite a dynamic there. And and I'll show you a better picture. I didn't have any really good picture. I have a better picture in a moment. You can get that shelving at Menards, just like, it's like egg crate shelving, but it's heavier plastic. And they used to use wooden boxes and cinder block bricks and wood, and that got to be old pretty quick, So they use the plastic shelving. It's much easier to move around and whatnot. So what you can see there, behind there is a big lotus. That's one season of growth. Behind that is a papyrus. Behind that man on the left is horsetails. Those are just in the water in a container. And then we have all the different water lilies growing in there. And they're wearing waders. So it's at least 3.5 feet deep. So there you can see a better picture of the shelving. And they have that around so they can work on the edge, because they don't go always in it, but they have long handled grabbers and stuff. They can, and pruners, Japanese style pruners that have a grip on it. You cut the leaf and then pull it out of the tank. And these are tropical lilies again too. So again, everything is in planters. So what they do is, I'll show you in a second, but here again, we have Kolaczewski. I want to talk about this for a little bit. So elephant ears is just a ubiquitous term, but there's Alocasia and Kolaczewski. They're all out of Southeast Asia. The Kolaczewski are the ones you want to use in the water. And when you go to the garden centers, you'll see all these elephant ears in the little pans and whatnot. Those are the ones that do well when they're submerged. The Alocasias do not. Those are spectacular plants too. And that's one season of growth. They're very, very fast growers. You can give them more fertility than normal because they really just, suck that up. If you've been out to Hawaii or Southeast Asia, they have these taro farms that stretch. It's like the cornfields out here. They just go forever, and that's all. But the history of the Trans-Pacific Oceanic Islands and the indigenous people of the Polynesians, they used these taro plants everywhere. They found on these coral islands chopped out holes in the coral, and there were remnants that they would plant this taro in there. They'd paddle back someplace, and they have this. I've had taro. Okay, it's a very starchy. I don't know. I sometimes 3 week old oatmeal might be better than taro. I don't know. But for horticulture purposes, this is a very spectacular plant. Now, somebody asked me last time I gave a talk at a garden club, what do I do? I get thrips or mites on things in a pond. There are a number of different oil products you can find online. You can spray these plants with. You can also use horticulture oil and make a very fine mist, or use a brush and paint it on the leaves. It doesn't hurt that at all. So you don't have to worry about using any kind of chemicals in your ponds. I don't use any chemicals whatsoever. I've been doing integrated pest management for almost 40 years now, so I don't use those kind of products. It just avoids a lot of problems. So here you can see they're being lifted out. Actually, I was at a conference, a Plant Propagator Society conference, and they were just that week, they were taking everything out. So I had a great opportunity to take pictures. It's just, that's all one plant, and then on the side there, it's grown out of the bottom of the drain hole, and it's still going. So they'll cut the plastic pot and they'll make a bunch of them. But that's one season of growth. Again, keep in mind, the water's at 78 degrees, Monday through Sunday, day and night, because these tropical plants have to have a lot of heat. And Pennsylvania is not known for its tropical weather except till you get to the summertime. It's a very interesting, it's a very sometimes an expensive way to showcase plants. So this is Certosperma mucrucei. These are huge plants. They get to be 9 and 10 feet tall. You see them once in a while at a garden center, or you may see them online. You want to try that? They will get 3-4 feet tall the first season. The interesting thing is these have spines on their petioles, and that's an adaptation for not for being eaten. And don't grab them because they're kind of stingy. So a lot of plants, plants are food for everything else. You see those cycads and cactus, how these things evolved. So the dinosaurs and these megafauna didn't eat them. I was in Colombia a few years ago, and we saw some big dendrocalamus bamboo. I mean, they're the size of a door pillar, and they have hairs on them, and then they have these like whips that come out that grab onto trees. But the other theory is that they think that those were deterrents when these giant camels and sloths would grab the plant, it would wrap around them, and I've seen them. They could cut a finger off. They're pretty tough. But these are very interesting because they're so weird. They have striped stems. They get these giant leaves. There's some that are striped in their leaves. They're known as lassoids too. But this is something that you can try. These are also found growing in Nepal, of all places. And some were introduced, but some are growing in the subtropical regions in the Himalayas. And there's a whole interesting thing about Asian horticulture, China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Nepal, these countries where some of these bananas come from there. There's a Musa Baju is grown in gardens here. That's a Chinese or Asian banana. So this is very something interesting you might want to think about trying out. This is Montrachardi. Now, Ty Streetman is coming in, so Ty may be able to tell us about this because this is found in Brazil. This is a young plant. That's growing like a 25-gallon pot there at the Fairchild. That's about 3 years old. They get 25 to 30 feet, and they form these giant mats, like a forest, and they float in the pond canal. And so there's a whole ecology of this plant and the fish that live underneath the roots. And there's actually very unusual birds, the quetzals, which are these birds with hooks on their feathers and their wings. They live in these trees and they nest because as this grows up, you don't see this one now, but they get giant spines on them, and the birds can hide in there. And anybody who wants to eat the eggs or get out there has to swim. And so there are, big piranhas out there and these big, other big fish that live in these areas. And so this is a very important plant for the ecology of the wetlands there. They find them moving around, they detach, they come together and whatnot. So this is something you couldn't necessarily grow here, but I just wanted to show you this. This is kind of an oddball thing to take a look at. All right. That brings us to the end of our program. The loaches love when I clean the tank. I can tell you, they're all very happy. So I took this picture last week, and it's like, thanks for getting the muck off the gravel. I said, oh, you're welcome. All right, so does anybody have any questions? I'll be happy to answer them, or I can talk to you about the raffle items I brought. So very quickly, I brought a big bag of sphagnum moss, a couple of bags of that royal gold mix. There's 3 bags of coconut coir, and I think there's a bag of tree fern fiber, and I something else back there. And um, I've got a bunch of pots. I don't know if we want to, people can take one or we could do a raffle. I've got some containers we could try out. Anybody have any questions? Yes, yes, Bilal. I think you could. They just get pretty large. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But they want to be like at least 75 degrees, maybe like 80 degrees. I put them outside. I don't have any this year. And in fact, I apologize. I didn't bring any plants because no one has shipped any water plants. In fact, I deal with two nurseries in the Carolinas, and they are out of business. So my one friend, he lost his house and his entire nursery with the hurricane and the floods. In Atlantic Seaboard, I go to a big trade show in January. It's called the MANT Show, Mid-Atlantic Nursery Trade Show. Three of the four nurseries I deal with, they got buried in snow, so they don't know when anything will start to grow. But those tropical lilies need at least, I would say 80 degrees is a good target range for temperature. You can grow them without fish, but then they'll get pretty, they'll grow to the size of the tank, and then they'll just kind of, so you might want to have to trim them periodically, but you can keep them in an aquarium. That's not a problem. I think you just need a big aquarium. Or a tub like that, anyway. Because when I would bring those, I just bring them, put them in the tub, and I just have a little filter, little pump going with a Florette foam, Swiss tropical foam, just keep it filtered like that. Anybody else?
In terms of the cannons,
Yes.
are there both specific aquatic varieties versus specific freshwater?
So you can adapt most of the cannons to grow in the water. That canna glauca, that's from Brazil. So that is an aquatic cannon. You can get them all to go into the water because they have a very hard corm. It's a really tough corm. I grow primarily Musifolia. Looks like a banana. They get 8, 9 feet, and those I've had them around ponds where they're wet. But that one, the glauca, is primarily an aquatic cannon. But I've seen people put all different cannas in there. Sometimes most of that stuff comes out of Tennessee or Oklahoma, of all places. They grow cannas in Oklahoma. But Chris, like Oklahoma, but there's a lot of canna growers down there, and they're like it feels like you grow corn here. There's just cannas. I've been there. I was like, wait, is that canna? Oh yeah. Wow, it's amazing. Anybody else? Yes, Jason.
That coconut substrate,
Yes.
is it safe to ever use that substrate for aquarium?
I would put sand or gravel on top of it. Eventually it gets waterlogged, but initially it's kind of I'd say it's corky to begin with. So, but when they use it in pots, it holds a lot of water. And if you had it in a pot where it was, where it was level with the water, it wasn't below it, it would come out. But I think over time it does get waterlogged. But I haven't done that yet. But I'm going to do it. I would put gravel or sand on top of that. Maybe an inch and a half or so, just to keep it from popping out. I look at a lot of these things and say, can I use this? Can I use that? I think there's a potential for some of these things. You just have to experiment with it, and try it out. But I think there's potential for that. It's a very clean product. It's also very pH friendly, and I'm a bit of a snob. I get my coconut coir from Sri Lanka, just so I would put that out there. It's India or Sri Lanka. And don't ask me why. I'm a Sri Lankan coconut coir guy, but it's actually a very good product. Um, the people that grow cannabis and other plants, when they soak it, they also leach it out, and then they use CalMag and other stuff. They want to condition it. I don't do any of that stuff. I just a couple of days. It looks like tea and has a very, I say, a strong leathery odor to it right away. But after a few days of rinsing it, that goes away. And then what I do is it's bone dry. I mean, it's like this much, and it gets to be this much. I soak it, I drain it, I press it, I kind of dry it for a few days, and then I add fertilizer to the water, and I take it out, and then I use it in a mix. Anybody else? Scott. You could use one of those tubs. You can go to Lowe's, Walmart, get one of these, laundry tubs or a storage tub, and you could do something like that. It doesn't have to be that big. I mean, I first started doing pots in the backyard, when I was, at home in our Chicago bungalow, and then I moved some stuff into the ground. I had to get permission to dig up, my grandmother's roses, God forbid that was a chore. But that big pond, we've got another pond like that in Barrington where we do all lotus around the edge. And then I can't think of his name, but he's a guy. He's up here in Dundee. He's won several awards. He has a huge garden that he installed. He does big water features, like they big a crane in and stuff. But They did a boardwalk. I think it was 100 and some feet of nothing but lotus along the edge of the boardwalk. And then there's a lily pond on the other side. I mean, this is spectacular. That's got to be, big cardboard check money when you get into that stuff. But you don't have to start out big time. I mean, you can take an old 20-gallon tank and just put water in it and start to grow some of these plants, And then it's like everything else. Once you figure out what you're doing and you move forward, you can do a little bit more, a little bit more. I don't have the room to do a lot of things that I want to do, but I like to grow a lot of these weird plants. These tropical lilies are very nice. They're very nice plants. They just need a lot of room. Blow out. Ah,
There's a shallower one that's maybe like 10 gallons that I've used as a container pond, and I highly recommend it. It's only like $12.
yeah, that's
It's a pretty good starting size.
yeah. Yeah, I bought a few containers at IKEA. The only problem with the IKEA ones is that they got feet on them. So if you put a lot of weight in them, they start to belly out. But I put a lot of stuff in there for substrate stuff, so it's not that heavy. Those have a lid too, and you can, put some holes in them. But yeah, there's, somebody's got to sell. I mean, Menards has that 11% rebate. They've got all kinds of stuff. And my daughter is Temu centric. So, but we saw something the other day. I didn't bought it, but they have acrylic boxes. I don't know if they'll hold water, but I'm interested because they're half-inch thick acrylic, which is, I think they're more display case stuff. And that's it, yeah. Well, whoever's going over to the fish store, you'll see Scott's got some old Hallmark display case with really heavy plated glass, and that's because all that stuff is heavy. So if you look at the industry application, I mean, um, they just had a video of the AO-AO museum in Japan, the new ADA museum, and they've got a tank in there that's 21 feet long acrylic. I don't know what that thing weighs. I don't know what it costs, but that's like government budget money. But the thing is amazing. I think they have 1,000 pounds of Hawkeye stone in that tank. It's incredible. So, and there's acrylic out there. I have acrylic myself. I was going to do that once. It's still sitting in storage, but that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other ballgame. Anybody else? Yes, sir. I would think just a regular water change. Just pour the water out because you can put some people in the old days we would put oil on the water, like mineral oil or horticulture oil. That's okay, except if you put fish in there, then they got to get they get that on their thing. But you could just change the water. Now, if you can, you can put a little air stone, or you can these little these little Walmart online fountain pump things. These are tiny little things. Just move the water out. Just change the water. That's the easiest thing to do. Because the mosquitoes, you'll see them. I mean, I was at a place one day last year. It was a little bird bath, and we moved to do something. I came back 2 days later, and there were mosquito larvae. I was like, what? But they're not in the water because in those koi ponds, I throw in platies. There's sometimes gambusia, and then all those ponds have a tremendous amount of insect activity. So the mosquitoes get eaten by a lot of stuff. That's a real quick thing. But just a water change is the easiest thing to do. Anybody else? All right, thanks. So, Scott, you want to talk about, or what else we want to talk about? Something else, and then we have our raffle and something else. Thank you, everybody.